Jason Nemer, the one and only. Welcome to the Thought Room.
Thank you so much. It's so comfortable. It's heel gezellig, as they say in Dutch. In Dutch, gezellig, it means comfortable, but it's also cozy. It's when there's a fireplace roaring. It's when slippers are comfortable and when you just feel supported, comfortable, and at home. And we're sitting in your living room, so it's very gezellig.
Gezellig.
There you go.
Yes, here we are being all gezellig on my floor cushions in my living room. And I feel like this has been such a long time coming for us. I find myself saying that often in the beginning of these interviews, but I truly feel like there's a divine sort of web being woven with the people that are brought to this show. And oftentimes I'm introduced to them 6 months, a year in advance before we actually get to be together in person. And that's kind of what happened with us.
Yeah, satelliting, that was the term that we kind of came up with yesterday when we were talking. We were in each other's orbits for quite a while before we dropped in on the physical level. And yeah, it's been a very good omen.
Yes, absolutely. And when I heard you were coming to Austin, I was very, very excited to meet you in person. And this will be a great segue into our jumping off point today, talking about what you do. But the reason I was so excited to have you on, first and foremost, before getting to know you as a human being, which is a whole nother layer, and you're just so fantastic. And like we said before this, we're having this awesome friendship that's beginning to blossom. But the initial reason for my excitement was that you are the co-founder of AcroYoga. And AcroYoga is something that has deeply and profoundly impacted my life, not only my wellness, physical fitness, mental fitness, emotional intelligence, but also my boundaries, my communication, my romantic relationships. And so I'm so flipping excited to have you here today and talk about this life-changing modality of acroyoga.
As you're speaking, my hairs are still standing up, and I love that I've been doing this for so long, and it still moves me to hear people's interaction with the practice. And I've been meeting a lot of people here in Austin, and when I ask a lot of these people, hey, have you heard of acroyoga? I'm still shocked how many people know about this practice. And I know cat is out of the bag to some degree, and it's going to keep growing, but I'm very honored and excited to hear more about your journey and to keep meeting people around the world that are being moved by this practice.
Absolutely. So before we get too far into it, just for someone listening who has not heard the term acroyoga yet, let's let them know what on earth we are talking about. And is this some sort of, the marriage of two things?
Yeah, it's actually the marriage of three things. It's acrobatics, yoga, and therapeutics. I think of these as the roots of a tree, and they're very old lineages. Something like acrobatics is not to one country. Every culture finds different ways to express their acrobatic nature. Yoga is definitely rooted in India, and then therapeutics and healing is just like acrobatics. Every culture has their own ways to do it. So I was lucky enough to find the co-founder, Jenny Sauerklein, and she had the therapeutics. I had a lot of high-level acrobatic training. We were both yoga teachers, and we put our skill set together. And basically what I would tell somebody, the elevator pitch of acroyoga is a practice that helps you get the most out of your life and gives you tools to engage with other people to make your relationship stronger, to make your community more vibrant. It's a lot about building trust and playing with each other. So it's very much part of our DNA to trust other humans. It's very much part of our DNA to enjoy being connected to other humans. And modern society and a lot of decisions that we've made as a culture, especially in America, have dimmed that light. The fact that we tell our children not to talk to strangers, I understand that it has a very strong benefit of protecting children, but it also casts a spell of distrust and separation. So I feel like acroyoga just reminds us that this is something, it's a long elevator pitch, but this is something that can help you live a more vibrant, full life.
Oof. I love this. Absolutely. And in a moment, I'm going to tell a couple stories about acro in my life, kind of curtailing off what you said about like the spontaneity of getting to know strangers and like how the world opens up for us when we bring that warmness, that spontaneity, and we say something like, hey, want to fly? And we used to do this in the middle of, Washington Square Park or Times Square. And you would watch people's faces light up when they were experiencing the magic of what acro yoga is for the first time. And the beauty of when people surprise themselves and they try something new and they feel that trust and they feel that weightlessness and being held by another person, being held by gravity. And there's this just ephemeral sort of embodiment that occurs that I think it can hardly be described. But just wanting to clarify as well, because when a lot of people, I've asked the question, have you heard of acro yoga? And people go, oh, yeah, and sometimes people confuse it with aerial yoga.
Hmm.
Do you want to clarify
Sure.
that?
Aerial yoga is when you hang things off the ceiling and stretch from them. And it's a beautiful complementary practice, but the fabric isn't going to give you any emotional support.
Mm.
So, acro yoga is based with humans. So, there's usually a base, somebody who lays on the floor, a flyer, somebody who's being supported by the base. And oftentimes we have a spotter. So, three is the magic number in developing your practice of acro yoga. Three is also the smallest community. So, as you learn how to ideally change positions from base to flyer, from flyer to spotter, you get a visceral experience of how it feels to be supported, how it feels to have fear, how it feels to be kind of the outsider that's just looking in and offering support and then giving space.
Mhm.
So, what I've seen many people do is come into the practice thinking they want to get this out of the practice, and as you change positions, change roles, you learn a lot about humanity by being in your uncomfortable position. So this is
Mhm.
something that is not going to be offered by something hanging off the ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely. So going to where did my obsession with acro yoga come in?
I can't wait to hear this story.
It's actually so wild. I just realized right now that I thought my acro yoga journey started in New York, but it actually started before that when I was like 24 years old and I was living in Edmonton, Alberta in Canada. And somehow I saw a flyer for an acro yoga class, I think. And I don't know, somehow able to convince my boyfriend, who was this large, tall police officer, to like dragged him with me to an acro
That's a good
yoga
base.
class.
That's, a
He was a very
strong,
strong base and he
responsible
was
human.
very willing, which I appreciated. And we took one acro yoga class and I was hooked. I loved the feeling of being flown and being upside down and being in back bends. I loved the team building, the trust, the rapport, everything. It was just challenging on like so many multi-dimensional levels that I really, really enjoyed it. And like you, and we'll get into your history in a bit, but like you, I had just kind of a regular yoga foundation and I love my regular yoga practice, but what I love about acro yoga is it kind of flips everything literally on its head.
Yeah.
It's like regular yoga practice can be so reverent and so yes,
Discipline.
somber and disciplined and also joyful, but you know what I'm saying? It's different than flipping around like a monkey and feeling these, like you go to an acro yoga jam, there's like music playing and it's completely different. And I like to say that because, especially for sometimes I get this feedback from women who want to encourage their male partners to try acro yoga. They're like, the guys are like, I don't want to try yoga. You know what I mean? It's like, what is that going to be? That's not going to be for me. But, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's actually where my acro yoga journey first started before I ever even moved to New York.
Yeah, I've been very surprised throughout my journey with this practice that it's very equal between men and women in most countries, whereas yoga is predominantly women. I find that men are very excited by the physical nature of the practice, and yeah, I don't see that it's super challenging to get people excited about the practice once they see it, and
Mhm.
after they see it, ideally, if they find a certified teacher, somebody that knows how to lead somebody through progressions, this practice is easier in my mind than a lot of yoga poses. I
Mm.
remember one of my first times teaching acroyoga at a retreat. The Dutch come back again. What country was I in? Somewhere in Europe, and there were a bunch of Dutch people, and it was people in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So they had some mobility issues, and I was teaching them sun salutations. And a basic sun salutation for a 60-year-old Dutch person was not easy.
Mhm.
And teaching them basic acroyoga not only was easy, but the emotional uplifting that I saw and felt from them doing the acroyoga, it was a marked difference. And I don't believe that partner practices are better or a substitute for solo practices. Quite the contrary. The more depth you have in partnership and the more depth you have in partner practices, it's essential to come back to who am I and what do I need and
Mm.
where are my balances and imbalances, so you can be authentic in your partnerships. Because if you just do partner practices, it's really easy to lose who you are and what you need. So both practices are beautiful and they're complementary.
Mm. I love this, and it's also going to knit so nicely into something we'll get to in a second, which is that my current partner, Judd, and I have hired you to work with us privately, and we've been doing these one-on-one lessons with you, and I'm having an awareness that what you just said about doing the individual practice, my experience of acro yoga this time around after having taken a couple years off and I've been nomadic. I've been traveling around the world and I miss my acro yoga community in New York that I was first fully formed and introduced to this practice in. And coming back to it now after having gone on this spiritual journey and done this deep dive and worked with plant medicine and worked on nonviolent communication, bringing a partner to this, it is so exciting how much more quickly we're learning to have the reflection both from each other, but also from you about how we communicate with one another and how profound that is and how much we've been working on that across
Yeah.
both of our lifetimes. So, um,
And it's 1,000% your fault that you're my client. You told me very clearly when I first came here, you need to visualize what kind of people you want to work with.
yeah.
And I was literally meditating one morning. I was like, all right, I'm ready to lock in some clients. And I sent the message to you too. And I said, hey, I want you to be my clients. This is
Mhm.
this is the deal.
Mhm.
And so joyfully, we've all said yes to each other. And this has
Yeah.
been a really powerful vortex the last couple of weeks. So
Man,
grateful.
isn't that such a good feeling? Like, I think as an aside, that's such a good indicator of alignment because it's so true. You were like, I was encouraging you, envision your ideal client. You were like
She's
envisioning
blonde.
us.
He's got tattoos.
And then you felt that. You felt that call in your heart. You put it out there and you group texted us and you kind of put it out there and Judd was literally like, "Where do we pay?" before
Yeah.
I could even look at it
I think he actually said, I was texting you as you texted me. I think it was
really
something like that.
even more of an indicator. So going back to New York. So I went through a really difficult time in I think it was 2015 now. Yeah, 2015, lost my stepbrother Daniel to a heroin overdose, had a huge awakening, left my career as an elementary school teacher while going through a breakup with that partner in Edmonton, Alberta, all at the same time. So it was shattering for my young ego at that time. I had no idea who I was. And I made a very brave and ballsy move. I had been to New York City one time in my life. When I was 17, I got kind of chosen from like a high school thing to go on this theater and arts summit for students who were leaders or what have you. So I'd only been to New York for 1 week when I was 17 and I was having this quarter life crisis at 25 and I basically booked not basically, I booked a one-way flight to New York. I stayed on my friend Chelsea's couch for 14 days.
Chelsea Chorus?
No, but I
Okay.
do know her. And, uh, and I was so deeply trusting in the universe to catch me. It was terrifying, but I knew, I just had a feeling, I had a whisper in my heart. This was the place to go. I had no rational reason other than my heart said yes. Because I barely knew anyone there and I didn't have a job and I didn't have an apartment. And you know how hard those things are to find in New
Yes.
York. But after 14 days, I not only had the keys to an apartment in my hand that was very affordable and beautiful in Brooklyn, I also had 3 job offers on the table. And so I flew back to Edmonton, Alberta. I let that partner know definitively that this we were transitioning, this was ending, and, gave him mostly everything that was left in the apartment because I couldn't fit it in my tiny little Kia Forte to drive across North America
Wow, what
with.
an adventure.
So, yeah, man, I drove and I had some help. Like my stepmom flew in for a leg of the drive and everything. It was like this team effort to get Hallie to New York. And I landed there on a Sunday evening with a Craigslist roommate I'd never met
That's
until I
brave.
was moving my shit up the
That's really
stairs.
brave.
Yeah, man. And Sunday night, I had a dog, like, everything was crazy. So I'm like, my dog's like, I've never been in a city before. I don't have a dog sitter yet. And I started work the very next day, like the next Monday. It's like 12 hours later. So and I hit the ground running. I mean, it was there were some skid marks along the way. It was I think in the first 3 months in New York, I'd moved to 3 different apartments, like things didn't work out where I was, and I was lonely. I was really, really lonely and I wanted to find healthy connection. And I think that I wasn't really ready to start dating yet, but I really had that deep desire for physical touch as well. And I needed to move my body. And I remembered the feeling of being at these acro yoga classes.
Mhm.
So I Googled, okay, acro yoga New York. Is this a thing? Does this exist? And of course, there's a booming acro
Yeah,
community in New York. One of the best
one
in
of
my,
the best.
in
Oh
my
my god.
personal opinion.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
know we have so many mutual overlapping
Yeah.
friends because of that. And so I went to my first acro yoga classes at Warrior Bridge,
Okay.
Sean and Laura and
Yeah. The
that whole
family.
crew, the family. And I just watched the way these people were being with
Mhm.
one another,
Yeah.
the way they were breathing, the way they were embodying their bodies, the way they were so gracefully and artfully communicating things that
Mhm.
were not always easy to communicate.
Sure.
It's like awkward sometimes, and
Yeah.
we'll get into that, but this is my story of my own indoctrination into acro yoga is that this
Mm.
deep desire for connection. And in fact, I would say, I mean, would you say connection is one of the sort of pillars of acro yoga? The title of your book is Move, Connect, Play.
Yeah, I would say that we need protein, we need oxygen, we need water, we definitely need carbs.
Mhm.
But without human connection, literally, we will die.
Mm.
We need it. We thrive on it. Is more than what we need.
Mhm.
It's something that is an emotional, spiritual, human multivitamin. And when people
Right.
have human connection on demand, like most acro yogis in the world, that aspect of our being is satiated. And when that aspect of our being is not satiated, there's not a lot of other things in our life that has as much ease to thrive.
Mm.
I feel like because we're mammals, because we are literally connected to our mother's milk and we're born into a community, because
Mm.
we're very complicated creatures. We don't get born and we're running and climbing trees the first year. The first year we're held. And in Bali is one of the beautiful traditions. The baby's feet never touch the ground for a year. They're
Wow.
held in humans' arms for a year. So this is how we are genetically predisposed. And when we have that, so many other things in our life can thrive. And when we don't have that, so many imbalances develop.
Wow, that's so wild about the babies in
Yeah.
Bali. Because you think of we have a term for that here in the West when a baby is not held, it's called failure to thrive, and
Mm,
newborns actually
interesting.
yeah, it's it's what happens when babies don't get enough touch for whatever reasons. Sometimes it happens because the baby has a certain condition when it's
Hmm.
born and it can't be touched,
Right.
and it creates all these kind of developmental issues.
Or when the mother is forced to go back to work 2 weeks after they give birth.
Right,
In Germany, you have the mother can have 2 years of paid leave, or the mother and the father can have 1 year together paid leave.
right.
There's a lot of systems around the world that are more realistic.
Same. I mean, same, but I'm saying, I grew up half my life in Canada, and their maternity leave is 1 year paid, and it can be split between the mom and the dad however they
Hmm.
want to
Yeah.
split it, which I think is amazing. I think someone will have to fact check me on this, but I think the US has maybe one of the poorest mat leaves that is available.
And the
To
highest rates of all kinds of crazy mental disorders from young children and, school shootings. This is something that happens in this country for many reasons, but
mm,
I think as people feel loved from birth into their young life, there's so much more ease in human connection. And when you don't have that, there's so many more struggles and mental imbalances.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that reflecting on my own experiences, and we'll go back to the topic of New York. I think without acro yoga, I very easily would have slid into a deep depression at the beginning of that move. It was such a large transition. There was so much grief, there was so much processing, and suddenly I had this very healthy outlet for my body, my mind, and my spirit. And I was building community, which
Hmm.
absolutely I believe is a pillar, like we're saying, in order to thrive. So I wanna throw it back to the beginning, like your origin stories. Your I was reading the preface of your book. It is so good.
Thank
It
you.
is so juicy, and I learned
Oh,
so much about you, and I loved all the little pictures you have in there. Like, you've got this black and white photo that you found of your grandfather doing like acrobatics. It
straight
was
up
like, what year
acrobatics.
was that? Like
40 in the 40s.
1940?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's, like, incredible. So I wanna give you the floor to take us back to
sure.
stories about your origin, where you were born. You have some
Hmm.
cool stories about your mom, about your grandfather, and eventually how it led you on this path of gymnastics, this path of kinda going for the Olympics
Yep.
for a time. And so, yeah, I'll let you take it from there and give us
All
your
right.
juicy
Here
retell.
goes. Era una vez. That's Spanish for once upon a time. I was born in Mexico, and my father's Mexican, mother's an American from California. Head varsity cheerleader, very typical blonde American. And my dad, I would say, was a typical Mexican in a lot of ways. So I was born there, but I got sick a couple months in and quite sick, almost died. And at that point, my mom had been living in Latin America for about 7 years. And she said, okay, enough of this adventure. Let's go back to America and try life there. Let's go to a hospital and save our second child. So thank God I was saved and grew up a relatively normal life as a white kid in America because my dad's Lebanese blood. So I look white, even though I was born in Mexico and I have half my family in Mexico. And they decided to raise us without Spanish, which, it is what it is. I struggled with that when I started studying Spanish. I'm like, you could have made it a lot easier on me. But I put the work in to learn Spanish and to go to Mexico and meet my grandma, learn how to play cards, talk shit, make black beans, do all the things that make me feel more connected to my roots and my family. So from the beginning, like I said, relatively normal life. And then when I was 12, I decided to go watch my brother who was taking gymnastics. I'm going to go check it out. And I was captivated. Actually, I'll rewind. When I was 9 years old was the '84 Olympics, and I was with my cousins up in Bainbridge Island, and they were outside playing, and I was hooked on the TV like I've never been hooked on anything before. And I remember seeing the gymnastics specifically, and I thought that looks like a really fun party. I want to go there one day. So when I was 9, I pretty much decided I'm going to the Olympics. Then when I was 12, I figured out, okay, gymnastics really is the way I'm going to go. So my first couple of classes was definitely not a talented gymnast. My mom would come just to laugh at us falling all over the gym. And it was fun. From the beginning, it was fun. And about 6 months in, I saw my first partner acrobatics, which was this big, strong man holding a smaller girl in a handstand on his hands. And I was floored. I was just shocked at what was capable, because gymnastics is one human playing with gravity and the different apparatus, bars, beams, rings, pommel horse, floor. Partner acrobatics, your equipment is another human. So I went right up to him and I said, I want to learn that. And he put me in this thing called a candlestick shoulder stand. I remember that was my first acrobatic move. And I was hooked. And so I asked them to teach me and became an acrobat from that moment forward. Did both acrobatics and gymnastics for about 3 years until I was 15. And at 15, I decided my gymnastics coach was not creating the right environment for me to thrive. He was quite strict, and acrobatics was more fun. So I took a left turn into acrobatics and did very well. At 16, I got to go to Beijing for the junior world championships, and that obviously would blow anyone's mind.
Yeah. You have this photo in the book of you, like, near the Great Wall or on the Great Wall doing this amazing acrobatics trick with a friend, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was my partner, Amber Malco was her name. I don't know what her
Mhm.
married name is now. I actually lost track of her, but yeah, I was 16, she was 12, and we won 2 bronze and a silver medal. So basically, I went to the highest level of acrobats under 21 years old and did well enough to feel like, okay, someday I will be a gold medal world champion acrobat. I'm shooting for that.
You were
At
15,
16,
16.
yeah.
Wow. Competing with, like, some of the top level
The
acrobats.
Chinese were insane.
Yeah.
Insane. So when I watched these Chinese people, I just realized how far we had to go to be at their level.
Right.
But at the same time, I already knew that we were moving in the right direction because we actually beat them in one of the routines because they fell and we didn't. So
Right.
it was inspiring, daunting, and affirming all in the same competition.
Yeah, I mean, that must have just also blown your mind hole open being 16 years old and being in China. I mean, just having that experience and how your horizons as a human being started to open at that point. You're beginning to travel the world very, very young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember the things that also captivated me were the really beautiful human interactions. So we had these African American tumblers from Flip City, New Jersey. Amazing. One of them won a gold medal. It was the only gold medal we got on that competition. And we were at the Forbidden City in Beijing, and there was this old man sweeping with this amazing plant-made broom. Remember it like it was yesterday. And he goes up to this African American kid and starts touching his hair and,
Uh-huh.
and rubbing his skin. And he
Uh-huh.
had never seen a Black person before.
Wow.
And we were all just so enamored with this cultural exchange of, back in 1991, China was not very open. There were not a
Mm,
lot of Westerners that had
mm,
been there. And just being able to communicate with humans without words and being able to have that spark of curiosity, that was something that planted a really strong seed in me of I want to understand how to interact with humans without language. And
right.
acroyoga ended up being that vehicle for me.
Right. It's like, I think you said this somewhere in your book. It's acroyoga is like this universal language. You talked about the community starts at 3, right? You have the base, the flyer, the spotter, and you give this little vignette of having 3 people with like 3 different languages
Hmm.
being able to engage in acroyoga together and high five and laugh and giggle because it is so a lot of it's so nonverbal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll go from 16 to 23, and then I'll put a cap on it. But so there I was competing at the high levels, and realized I still wanted to go to the Olympics. And in competitive sports acrobatics, it's still not an Olympic sport. So when I hit 21, I had a come to Jesus moment, and I realized that I'm not going to leave acrobatics, but I pretty much got to the point where I was supporting myself as an acrobat. And if I would have won the national championships, I couldn't afford to go to world championships. So it was time to put my big boy pants on, go back to college. While I was in college, my grandmother passed away, my American grandmother, and we went to the funeral and we were cleaning the house and we found a bunch of old photos. And that was when I saw the first photograph of my grandfather doing acrobatics, which she always said he was a gymnast. And when I saw that
Huh.
photograph, I was just like literally jaw hit the floor. It's in my DNA, and it's it's really sad to me that I never got to do acrobatics with my grandfather, but I did have a few years when I was very young. He died early from ALS, but yeah, it was just very affirming.
So cool. So cool. And plus your mom being a cheerleader.
Yeah,
It's definitely in your DNA.
yeah.
Cool.
So then the last part of this early chapter of my life was I was coaching cheerleaders and teaching them how to do tumbling. And they said, "Hey, do you want to come to the Olympics and perform in opening ceremonies?" And I didn't even take them seriously. But all week long, that question echoed in my head. And when I got back into the gym the next week, I said, "Are you serious about that offer?" And they said, "Yeah, you have to be a cheerleader for Sacramento State University for the next year." It's like, okay, so there's some strings attached.
Right.
But I said yes and got to go to Macon, Georgia and train for a month with 800 cheerleaders for a 15-minute segment of the opening ceremonies.
Wow.
And
Which Olympics were these?
96.
96.
Yeah, I was 21 years young,
Where were they?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, they were. Okay.
So when I was seeing the faces in there was 60,000 people in the Olympic Stadium, I had never seen so much diversity in facial expressions, clothes, like the whole world was
Wow.
together. Muhammad Ali lit the torch.
Wow.
It was so powerful. And what was powerful to me was a similar thing that I felt in China. It's human connection. So this is the most widely televised event in the world every time the Olympics happen. And I felt this feeling of oneness. And I didn't know it, but that was again another seed that was planted in me.
Mm.
Olympics is for high level acrobats and gymnasts and the highest level of sports. And I felt that if I could find a way to share this oneness culture with all people, that would be something I could dedicate my life to. And that's what AcroYoga ended up. That was my way to make this oneness accessible to all people.
Mm. Amazing. Yeah. So there were all these pieces from your acrobatic gymnastic journey, and then later on in the story in your book, you talk about coming to yoga
Hmm.
as a separate practice. Sort of, was it in your college
College,
years?
yeah, senior year.
Yeah. And so that was just kind of getting introduced to that somehow. Maybe you went to a yoga class, or you want to talk about?
Yeah, it was my senior year at UCSD in San Diego, and I realized too late, but not too late, that I could take a quarter of my classes pass fail. So my senior year of college, I took French, eugenics, yoga, econometrics, and some other very strange class. Oh, Asian philosophy. So
Mm.
that the Asian philosophy class and the yoga class completely blew my mind, changed my trajectory. So learning about Buddhism, Taoism,
Mm.
Confucianism, and the yoga practice, it was a 7 a.m. class. And I would literally wake up 6:55, look at the clock, be like, I'm definitely not going to make it. And I would show up 15 minutes late to this 1 hour yoga class pretty consistently, drag my ass to that class. And the teacher didn't know my background. I didn't tell her anything about it. I was very flexible, obviously, in most ways, but there are some new ways, like pigeon,
Right.
horrible at pigeon.
Right.
Lotus, horrible. There were some misses in my training, but it was what she would say at the end of the class that really moved me because
Mm.
she brought spiritualism to it. She brought breath awareness. So it wasn't flexibility training to get better at acrobatics. It was dropping into
Mm.
this temple of my body and connecting to it and
Mm.
bringing philosophy to it. So I was going to be a stock trader. And that senior year, I was like, nope, I'm going to retire as soon as I graduate and do what I want with my life for the rest of my life. And
Mm.
to a large degree, I have.
That is so beautiful. And I feel that that story is actually pretty common when it comes to yoga. At least I'll speak for myself. It's like, I think I came to yoga thinking this will be a fun way to stay fit or like not really do anything, you know?
I want to
And
learn some new arm balances. That was one of my motivations.
right. And then what you're talking about is this deepening of awareness into like what it really is.
Yeah.
And that spiritual component waking up. And it's not just, oh, my body feels good and I'm getting flexible. It's like there's a in touchness with self
Yeah.
that happens, just happens. You don't have to strive for. It happens automatically as one, with discipline starts to deepen their practice. And that's what's so magical. So it sounds like you had a moment, like that was a little spiritual awakening of sorts, and you recognized that everything you'd been doing with the body had this whole other dimension,
Yeah.
which was its connection with spirit.
Completely. Yeah. So this is it was the first time in my life I've ever done this. I graduated, and like I said earlier, my grandma passed away, and I had a $14,000 inheritance that just came at the perfect time for me to finish college and have all summer in San Diego to just become immersed in all these amazing practices. So I was reading 5 spiritual books at the same time, and I still will read multiple books at once, but this was a different kind of hunger that I was devouring this
Right.
information and just feeding my soul and my spirit. Because another thing that I did struggle with as a child growing up is my parents didn't raise me with religion. So my dad came from Mexico, and he felt that the Catholic Church did a lot of things to oppress Mexicans. My mom was forced into being religious and didn't really believe in it. She was a rebellious hippie from the 60s. So being that I didn't have religion, whenever there'd be weddings, I didn't know the prayers, I didn't know the rituals. I'm like, all right, you didn't teach me Spanish, you didn't teach me religion. What did you get? No, they did a great job. I love my parents. But what I realized when I found spirituality is my mom let me find it on my own.
Mhm.
And that was a really beautiful thing. And the funny thing is, she actually did find Taoism at a similar age in her life.
Mm.
So I'm glad that she let me find it on my own. And yeah, very grateful that the spirituality started to blend with my movement practices.
Mhm. Amazing. And then so fast forwarding to this kind of moment where acro yoga itself was truly birthed with your co-founder Jenny. Can you think back to that evening and just take us through, like, walk us through this moment where this thing, just the threads cosmically came together for this thing that has now become a worldwide modality. Like sit with that for a second, my friend. You've created something that people are practicing worldwide, and I can see the tears welling up in your eyes, which is
Yeah.
so exciting to me to see and to be able to reflect that to you and the recognition and honoring that. Like that is no small feat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for seeing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very crazy to feel where things are versus where they started. And at the same time, it's not crazy at all because, all right, so I'll give you the origin story, and then I'll give you a few play by plays that were markers of me feeling like, wow, we're really onto something. So I had heard of Jenny Sauerklein many times from many friends in the Bay Area. I graduated college, decided I was going to be a yoga hippie, and got my first teacher training was Bikram.
Uh-huh.
And I was a Bikram yoga teacher in San Francisco, living in my van, being like the
Yes,
ultra,
man.
ultra hippie. And I was working at the Circus Center, teaching trampoline. I was teaching adult gymnastics. So I was just kind of all over the place, scrappy, trying to make it happen.
Right.
San Francisco is a very competitive yoga market, probably still is.
Mhm.
It still is. So I'd been hearing about this Jenny, and we actually trained in the Circus Center, just different hours. And when we finally met, I put her in a hand-to-hand, which was that first thing that I ever saw in acrobatics, was somebody doing a handstand on another person's hand. So I did that with her, which blew her mind because she'd seen it, but she'd never done it.
Right.
So her acrobatic mind was just blown. And then she put me into folded leaf, which is a therapeutic flying pose, which basically uses acrobatic mechanics in the service of decompressing your spine.
Right. It's
And
like an upside down
it
massage.
is.
Yes.
And that completely blew my mind because I'd been going upside down at that point for 20 plus years, but
Right.
never felt the therapeutic potential of acrobatics. So we were literally up until 5 a.m. talking through this way to bring our skill sets together and empower people to do things that they didn't think were possible. And we really had everything figured out except the Thai massage that first night, just from our collaboration. And the next week, she came and started teaching with me at the circus center. I was teaching a partner doubles class, and we came up with the term contact acro, which is horrible. If you say it fast, contact acro, it just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah.
But
Not
for
sexy. Doesn't roll off the
no,
tongue.
not at all. But
Okay.
that's what we were for the first probably year and a half.
Okay.
Is we would go to Dolores Park in San
Okay.
Francisco.
Yeah.
We called it the office, and we would play. And what we came up with, we would teach at Yoga Tree, the yoga studio that we were teaching at. So that was kind of the where it all started and how it came together.
When did it become AcroYoga instead of contact acro?
Let's see, I met her 2003, 2005. It was like 2 years-ish. I was at the Santa Monica Original Muscle Beach, which I have coined the acro green, which that's what most people call it now.
Really?
But the old school
Cool.
acrobats don't like that at all.
Okay.
So I don't want to ruffle any more feathers, but the original Muscle Beach, as acro yogis know, the acro green is, we were training there. And I remember I walked off the green and just kind of got that intuitive hit. Let's change the name to AcroYoga. And that's kind of where that started. And then I'll give you one of the other touch points. So 2006, first teacher training. 2008, we did our first world tour. And we were invited to teach at many yoga conferences in Germany and Hong Kong. And it was the first time that I taught people from many different cultures acroyoga. I saw that it was working in America, but I had no idea what Chinese people would think of it, or Russians or Germans. And when I got done with that tour, shockingly, at that point, everyone 15 minutes into an acroyoga workshop, they're the same. They're little kids playing with each other. They're having so much fun. And the more barriers to entry there are, like when I taught in Japan, it was very awkward the first 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they broke through the cultural barriers of touch and remembered what it was like to trust people and play, it completely lit me up, lit the room up. And after that first world tour, I was like, okay, this is going to be a global thing. And I dedicated 10 years of dedicated work and travel to make it a global practice.
That makes me want to cry again. I'm like with joy because I'm picturing people unlearning things.
Yeah.
Like unlearning the separation that we've created.
Yeah. And I also remember having translators at many of these workshops. And the thing is, remember I was in Shanghai teaching acroyoga. And as soon as I did a demo, people got it. They just saw the connection. They saw the trust. They
Right.
saw the joy. And every single human that I do this practice with, doesn't matter what language they speak the language of touch and play.
Beautiful. I love in the book too that you kind of bring up how most people have, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of people have actually done acroyoga and they didn't even know it because you talk about when your parents put you in an airplane and you're kind of flying on their feet. That's a very basic acroyoga pose that we call bird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also met a primatologist who studied bonobo apes in the Congo for several years.
Yeah.
And she was telling me about these trust games that they play.
You have a picture of this
I
in
do.
your book.
I
Okay,
do.
talk about this. I
Yeah.
love this.
This was a good discovery. So I keep, finding these people in my path that help explain and validate why it works. I didn't know why it worked, but I experientially have seen it work. So it's been cool to kind of put together the pieces like a Sherlock Holmes mystery. And one of the mysteries is, why is it so universal? So these apes, one will hold the other by the wrist and swing them from the top of the trees. And the one that's being swung doesn't hold back. It keeps the palm open, and both creatures are laughing. They're having a good time. So she tells me the story. And that night I go and I'm flying people at this event, and I have this child, maybe 2 years old. So there's not much linguistic possibilities with the 2-year-old. And in the beginning, he's holding me. There's a lot of fear. And then there was the moment where his hand let go, his face lit up, he started smiling, and then I just got to do all kinds of fun transitions with
Aw.
him, and he was in that trusting space. And it was after I heard the story of these trust games, and that's when it really hit me that this is why it's so universally powerful, because our DNA is coded to learn how to trust each other and to
Mm.
learn how to playfully earn each other's trust.
This is beautiful because how my mind is knitting that all together and tying that up in a nice tiny bow is not only is it in your DNA, Jason Nemer, acro yoga is in every single one of us, just kind of waiting to come out. And I think that is astonishingly beautiful. And I want to go back to I fucking love this picture of you living out of your van and, like, teaching at a circus school. Like, that is so amazing, and to go from there to where you are now and this amazing, incredible book you have coming out, and in a little bit, we'll go into your process
Yeah.
around getting that published because I know you have some cool stories about that as well, and you have this thing like Fly Before.
Fly people before you negotiate.
Right. Okay. So, we'll get into that in a second.
Well, I also don't want to miss the opportunity. Did I tell you about the Becca Krause part of the story with the van?
No.
Okay. Well, buckle up. This is a good one.
Okay. Shout out to
So,
Becca.
oh my God, she's one of my dearest friends. So this amazing woman, Becca, on my 30th birthday, she invites me over to a surprise party. And I'm living in my van at the time, and I got a case of coconuts, a book on Buddhism, a bunch of friends celebrating. So we had a great night, and the next day I go out to my van slash home, and it's gone. There's glass on the ground, and my
No.
home was stolen. So there I am, 30 years old, with nothing other than coconuts and a book on Buddhism. So of course I go crack a coconut, start
Open the book
sipping it.
on.
I'm page 5 on Buddhist philosophy. It's
Oh, man.
homelessness and wandering. So I sent an email to my
Whoa.
mom and dad, half joking, half not. I'm like, well, this is what happens. So I'm going to shave my head, get a begging bowl, and start wandering. And my dad took it seriously. He's like, I didn't raise a son to be a beggar. And I'm like, okay, no, you don't understand me, Dad. I love you anyway.
Aw.
But basically, Becca, in that moment, she's like, here's $20, here's a toothbrush, here's a key. You live on the couch now. This is your home. So
Oh.
she showed up 1,000% for me, always has.
Mhm.
And that's actually what got me traveling, was that moment. I was trying to stay in San Francisco and make it as a yoga teacher, and AcroYoga had other plans for me. Life had other plans for me. So it was something that I learned deeply from that is it's good to have a clear vision of what you want, and it's even better to be flexible about how you get there. I
Mm.
wanted to be an Olympic level acrobat. Well, I was a cheerleader that got to go to opening ceremonies. I wanted to have AcroYoga change the world. Didn't happen in San Francisco. It happened when my home was liberated from me and I got
Ooh,
to,
I love that.
yeah, I was home free and home full. I've had so many homes in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's always a trade off, and there's always things that you want to have that you don't. But to a large degree, that was a pivotal moment for me to trust in the universe and to not be fixed about how acroyoga landed in the world.
Mm. You traveled so much, as you just mentioned, and you have gone everywhere from this journey with the van to you have taught at Burning Man, and then you work with celebrity clients, and then you've also, been to refugee camps teaching acro yoga. I'm wondering if you're willing to share a story or two, some of your favorite peak moments, learnings, or things that really moved you in this journey of teaching acro yoga.
Yeah, I'll keep the celebrity names anonymous, and I'll just give a caveat of how acroyoga has been really powerful for rich, famous people. It's when you show up to an acroyoga experience, you show up as a base flyer or spotter. And a lot of times, people that are noteworthy, there's always an agenda when they interact with other people. Other people want things from them. So it's been really healing
Mm.
to invite these people to the community and have the community show up as a human versus as
Right.
somebody. And I'll use one name. Sergey Brin, the founder of Google, was one of my early fancy people that I worked with. And he came to a 5-day event in New York.
Did you meet him at Burning Man?
I did.
Yeah, okay, I think this is in the book,
It
right? So
is.
you leading by example, flew this person, you
Didn't know who
didn't
he
know
was.
who he
Yeah.
was, you treated him like a human being, and he
Hmm.
became so enamored with this practice. What is this? This is magical. That he then, followed you to one of your workshops to deepen his practice,
Yeah.
right?
I actually got to go to his house on I think it was his 32nd birthday. And I was invited to, I don't even know what I was invited there for. What ended up happening was singing hippie kirtan music and doing hand to hands with him in the pool and just being with his family. So gaining trust, one positive human interaction at a time. And when he came to this event in New York, we were hanging out at his place after. And he said, one of the biggest compliments I've ever received, he said, I really admire the culture you've created with acroyoga.
Wow.
And that was, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was maybe 5, 6 years into the acroyoga journey. And to have somebody who's created the Google campus and has created
Right.
so many big, powerful things in the world, that was a moment that gave me a lot of confidence that what I had
Mm.
birthed, co-birthed with Jenny, was really striking a chord with people that not only have a lot of power and influence, but have experienced a lot of bringing big things into the world themselves.
Wow. Wow. What a compliment. And I want to turn that back into a question. If you had to most succinctly just kind of drop into the feeling of this for a second, but sum up for somebody who, again, has never experienced the magical culture of acro yoga, maybe in 5 words or less, could you paint us a picture of what being completely dipped and immersed in that culture feels like?
Yeah, you're accepted. I
Mm.
can say it just like that. You are perfect. You are accepted.
Mm.
And the thing that I love about circus versus competitive acrobatics and gymnastics, in the circus culture, the more freaky you are, the better. I mean, we
Yeah.
want bearded ladies. We want,
Yeah.
anomalous humans. And
Yes.
everyone that comes to an acro yoga experience, if it's guided well, can all thrive in the way that they're imbalanced because we are born imbalanced. We have a heart on one side, we have a liver on the other side. We are not born perfectly symmetric beings,
Mm.
and our imperfections are our opportunities to learn how to lean into other people to find balance. And yeah, I would say that the magic of acro yoga is being able to be seen and held and supported exactly where you are and to evolve in a direction that you want to go. What's been really fun for me is I've had friends now for 15 years, some of them 20 years, and we hold each other accountable. Like we see each other's life and practice.
Mm.
And, if somebody is getting injured consistently with how they're practicing, we call them out. Be like, yo, you could do more therapeutics, or maybe you need a spotter. And
Right.
it's not in a negative way, it's just in a way, or the other way is when I've got a really good friend that came from the finance world,
Mhm.
and let's say that he's a recovering douchebag. He did a lot of shady things in his previous life, and in the first 5 years of acro yoga, he did a lot of things that were not what I would say the ethos of acro yoga. He would
Right.
he would take advantage of people financially, and I've witnessed him. I've known him for 15 years now. And in the last 5 years, he's so generous and he's so kind. And it's cool to see that's something that is unique and beautiful about the culture of acro yoga is it's an ecosystem that is self-regulatory.
Mm.
I am, the Santa, acro Santa, or the Papa of acro yoga on some levels. But when you get into a community, if there's somebody who's interacting in a skillful way or in a non-skillful way, people are going to shine that back.
Yeah.
So it's not any one person's responsibility to make the practice safe or to keep douchebags from being douchey.
Mhm.
Everyone's going to show up with the skill set they have, and the community can help elevate each other's
Yeah.
blind spots.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. As you're speaking, I'm just having warm, fuzzy memories of my time in New York with my acro friends flooding back when you started talking about the culture and being accepted exactly for who you are. I'm thinking about all the afternoons playing in Sheep's Meadow
Hmm.
and you know, Washington Square Park and just tumbling around, laughing, working on skills together. And then I'm thinking about how we'd play in the sun all day and then we'd just like put on neon stuff and glitter and like fishnets and whatever weird things. And we'd go out and somebody was always doing a circus performance or
Yeah.
a burlesque performance or
House of
House
Yes.
of Yes, and, the box and where else? The slipper room and
Hmm.
just, kinda living that culture, like hopping on trains with friends, and I remember this one day that we planned was, like, we were gonna do acro on the trains. So,
Oh, how fun.
yeah, we were all dressed up super freaky and weird and fun and, um, people wearing wigs and all sorts of things. And we just kinda casually got on the train like normal, and then as soon as the train started going, people are, flipping upside down on
Hmm.
holding themselves sideways on a pole. Some people were also pole dancers from
Yep.
that group. Everybody does a little bit of everything, and the train is just cheering, and we're all just, playing together, and people are clapping, and there's so much joy. So that's one particular memory I have, and then another fond one is remember when flash mobs were like really a thing?
Yeah.
So we had a flash mob in Times Square.
Uh-huh.
So we all, I don't remember how
The
many of us.
Psalm and Mendel involved?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
I think there was like 20 or 30 of us, but we just had pre planned this and we all showed up in Times Square. And then at the appointed moment, we all just broke into this little acro routine that we'd
Yeah.
planned out. And it was incredible because what started to happen was people were watching and cheering, and
Yeah.
then the police there, like, put up barricades around
To
us
keep you going.
to keep us going and to keep us, like, safe, and it was
Yeah.
so cool, and it was magical, and then people came up afterward with all these questions, like, "What is this? Where can we
Hmm.
learn this? You people look so happy."
Yeah. Yeah, I think about this often. If somebody's in the park doing a triangle pose, they could be having the most ecstatic moment, connecting all their chakras, being one with the universe. Nobody cares. They see
Uh-huh.
some weirdo in the corner of the park doing a pose.
Right.
But the same weirdo on top of another human doing a similar type of pose and having a similar ecstatic experience, when somebody watches it, they get elevated by it because
Mm,
people love to see human connection. People
mhm.
love to see people that are having a good time, being connected. So I definitely attribute the growth of this practice to a large degree because it looks captivating. People are drawn to it.
Mm. So I have one last request for a story before we transition more deeply into talking about your book and also talking about the amazing opportunity that I personally have had to work with you and to work with my partner, Judd. But my last question is, will you speak about that journey to the refugee camp to
Yeah.
teach acro yoga? What was that like? And I know there was like stuff around getting across the border and all of these snags. So I think that was a really powerful piece of your book.
Yeah, I was at a New Year's event last year, and the question was these cards you pull, and it was, what's something that you're really proud of yourself for doing? And this was that.
Mm.
I am feeling emotional just thinking about it, so
Mm.
emotions will ride this wave. And
Let 'em fly,
yeah,
baby.
I'm glad for it. I'm glad that I'm able to feel
Mm.
sadness and struggle and difficulty and victories because they need each other. You can't have victories without struggle. So the migrant caravan showed up to Tijuana, the border with Mexico and America, the day before Thanksgiving 2018, maybe. And I have a friend who invited me and about 10 other people. There were influencers, dancers. And so somehow we got this idea, an invitation to go there. And we drove down in two cars and got to this refugee camp. And just getting past the front door took about 2 hours. And I was being as persuasive as I could. And I didn't know if this whole trip was going to be just for nothing. But sure enough, we get past the gate. And as soon as we walk in, it's just thousands of people and it's anything but clean.
Wow.
The first moment was probably
Wow.
the hardest moment for me.
Tell me about it.
Well, I get this kid up in the air and he starts giggling and laughing and he drools on me and it spit comes in my eye and my hands are filthy. I'm laying on the ground and I'm just like, okay, I'm fully in now. There's no turning back. So I tried to just, wipe the spit out of my
Wow.
eye and just hold space. And when the
Yeah.
kid came down, he was from Honduras. And I knew that because he gave me a Honduran peso. So this is
Uh,
a kid who has walked thousands of kilometers, left his country, has nothing. I fly him and he hands me this gesture of,
it's
I
like
want
all
to
he
offer back to
has,
you. Yeah.
probably. That makes me want to cry.
Yeah, so it was like a trial by fire moment,
Yeah.
and then the dancers started dancing, and then we got escorted to the football field because we were kind of causing a ruckus in a good way. And so, what happened for the next couple of hours is we would put music on that they knew, and we would dance with them, and I would do acro with them, and what was really moving was these people have nothing, and they have a border that Trump said that day he authorized lethal force. So if 100 people tried to run the border, they would all get shot. So, like, the amount of tension in that space was about as thick as I've ever seen or felt. But the amount of joy, the amount of connection, the amount of trust that those people had with us, for us, it was really, really powerful. And, we got done with that first experience. We left to get some food. And as we were leaving, we got word that there was a shooting, that somebody did die that day in the camp. So it was like,
Wow.
it was, and being Mexican born and feeling, the first time I felt true racism towards Mexican culture was when Trump said Americans are rapists, or not, sorry, Americans, Mexicans are rapists. They're bad people. They're drug dealers.
Mm.
And, I grew up white, but I've learned Spanish and I've spent a lot of time in the last 20 years deepening my feeling of being a Latino male. And when I heard that, I felt it in my heart. And I
Mm.
was happy I did, because I don't feel a lot of the other racism, Asian, people of color.
Mhm.
But that was the first time as an American I felt, a presidential candidate shooting at my
Mm.
heart.
Mm.
And so I felt a lot of joy for the fact that I was able to bring something of value to a tense situation. And the next day was Thanksgiving. And I told my mom I was doing all this, and she was very proud of me and happy that I was doing it. But I told her I didn't know if I was going to make Thanksgiving dinner. And sure enough, I was making my way up to Sacramento. I go to this Starbucks, and the amount of suffering I felt in the Starbucks of people waiting for their coffees and having to be with their families when they didn't really have a strong relationship with them on average, it was very different than what I felt in the refugee camp. So the
Wow.
refugees, because they knew who their brothers and sisters were, they knew who their tribe was, they've been walking with them for thousands of miles. There was a different level of knowing who has your back and who loves you. And I feel like in America in general, there's a lot of disconnect and there's a lot of a lack of joy. And I found more joy in that refugee camp in that moment than I felt in that Starbucks on Thanksgiving Day. So it was just an interesting day, from one day to the next, dichotomy of what is valuable, what do people have, and what are they lacking.
I just want to let that land for a moment, because that is the people that this podcast is going to reach are mostly people in the West.
They're the ones at Starbucks.
They're the ones at Starbucks. We're the ones at Starbucks. And
Yeah.
that's okay. I'm not having judgment of us, and I'm including myself in that. But I think it's profound to consider that even with all that we have, with all that I have, there is something that another culture has that we don't. I mean, I think that's humbling, and I think that needs to be said, because in America, the attitude is like, we have everything, we're the best, we're on top.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's always important to maintain an openness to being wrong
Yeah.
about everything.
Yeah.
Like, I am willing to have my mind changed. And that's the way that I conduct these interviews. That's the way that I try and run my life to stay in integrity, is always being willing to be wrong.
Yeah.
it's an exciting way to live, actually. It promotes a great deal of possibility and surprise and spontaneity, and I think that that can't be underscored enough, what you just said about we think we have everything here in the West, but on some levels, we are tricking ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's this deep, visceral longing to belong to one another.
Yeah.
Ram Dass says we're all just walking each other home,
Hmm.
you know, and bringing ourselves back to the core of that. And that's what you're doing here. And that's why I am on the brink of tears as I say this. And that's why I'm so fucking happy you're in my life, Jason
Yay.
Nemer. Yeah.
Sames. Yeah, I haven't been able to express this yet, but Becca Kraus is one of my angels, and you're good friends with her.
Uh-huh.
And when we first dropped in, I knew that this was going to be a powerful connection. And I'm just so grateful for angels you meet along the path
Mhm.
and people that show up for you on big levels that have no reason to, and it doesn't make logical sense.
Mm.
And I think the more that we live in that magical space of expecting that people are going to show up big for us for no good reason. And
Right.
then when we do that as well, think about how great your day is. I remember one of the most profound, strange, beautiful gestures. I was in Brussels, Belgium. I don't remember all the circumstances. I had a 200 euro note and a credit card, and I tried to get a croissant, an orange juice, coffee on my way to the airport, and I didn't speak Portuguese. And the guy looks at me and just shakes his head and just crosses his arms, and he's not going to give me the shit. And this stranger pulled out his credit card and paid 15 euros. And I did start crying. I started crying.
Right.
And I think it's we have opportunities every day to find a special way to show up for somebody. You don't have to put them in the air. You don't have to do AcroYoga with them. But the more that you can find ways to engage and give back in little ways, those little things are not little. And that's our opportunity. And I think that's what will change the world on a big level, is when 51% of us believe in that and practice that. And then those other 49 are going to get lifted by that. I'm a deep hippie.
You are a deep hippie. I love this because actually this is a great segue into your book, Being a Deep Hippie. Your book is, you have sections. You have like the science of acroyoga, and then you have the art of acroyoga. So there's the deep and there's the hippie part, right?
Mhm.
And then it's like this beautifully grounded, practically applicable, but also fun, step by step. You have your little periodic table in there, which I'm sure you'll talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell me about the core pillars of this book, and maybe a little bit about the experience of writing it and what it
Yeah.
taught you about you.
Wow. Yeah, the book. So I got the book deal at the end of 2019, right before the pandemic. So
Oh,
my
damn.
my timing was perfect. I quarantined and wrote a book, and
Mm.
I'd been collecting the information for the book for probably 5 years, and it was one of my bigger anxieties. Is I have my To Me backpack that I travel the world with when I was traveling, and I had maybe 100 pages in very disheveled form, that it was the most valuable thing that I had, because it was all my experiences, all of the wisdom that I collected from watching people for a decade around the world doing their thing. So the book is, I think it's like 4 parts. It's one part how to, one part the principles that get distilled when you do it, one part just the wisdom that I've collected from healing masters, yoga masters, and then the other part just funny shit that I want to throw in there that makes
Yeah.
me smile and hopefully makes you smile.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very vulnerable process. You're one of the first people in the world that's read it, and
Thank you so much for that honor.
yeah,
It's great.
thank you for reading it and giving me honest feedback.
Yeah.
Um, the process of writing it was actually quite easy, and it shocked me again and again each step of the way. My first writing retreat was before the pandemic really kicked off. It was February, March. I was in Thailand
Mm.
and got up to like 40,000 words, and I needed to get to 60,000. So at that point, it was just like, can I actually generate enough information to make a book?
Right.
And within 2 weeks, I was already 3/4 of the way there. And then when I got to Mexico, I really dedicated to a writing retreat for multiple months. And I hired some of my best friends, a PhD neuroscientist, a PhD Middle Eastern studies, smarty pants. One of my dear friends, Britta, who is just my homie, who's my day-to-day editor that would just keep cheerleading me. And then my buddy Naif, who was kind of a moral compass, somebody that he's like, hey, if you write it like that, you're going to be offending these people. So he was
Mm.
somebody who just gave me a lot of emotional intelligence about how I can present these ideas in a way that it will land with the most people. And then when I gave the book to my editor and we got on our first call, I gave her the manuscript. I was so nervous. And when I get on the call, it was a half-hour call and she was just saying really good things. And then at the end, I said, okay, so how do I need to improve it? And she just said, everything's great. This is going to be an amazing book. And I have never seen myself or identified as an author. I identify as a teacher, as a practitioner, and I've written AcroYoga manuals how to do AcroYoga, but this was a much more personal thing that I was sharing. And once I got her affirmation, it's been super fun. The only snags have been layout. The layout has been very challenging because there's over 500 photographs and it has to
Right.
be very detailed how the instruction is laid out. And
Yeah.
their publishing house this is not something they've done before. So
Right. I mean, it is. It's laid out so beautifully. You've got all
thank
these
you.
color photos.
Yeah.
It's really fun how it all connects to that periodic table that you have in there and how it's all color coded and there's quotes in it. So it's a very, it's a very engaging book. It's fun to look at and it's true to brand, I think, with acro
Yeah.
yoga. Everything in it's like really playful.
And it was actually a 2-book deal, so there will be a second book coming probably a year after this one launches. And what this has done for me personally is I've been very dedicated to acro yoga for the past 18 years, and it will be something that I dedicate to for life. But it's interesting that number 18, it's like, all right, you're an adult now, acro yoga. I want to live my life now. And
Right.
so I'm giving myself the capacity once I get these books done to feel like I've done my thing for the world through acro yoga, and now I don't know what's next. And I'm excited to create open space to have new collaborations, new directions. I will always be an acro yogi. I'll always support the practice, but it has not been in a balanced way. And this is the first time in my adult life that I'm financially hitting a point where I'm receiving from the practice. And yeah, moving to Austin and being here and having you be
Yeah.
my first big client.
Yeah,
And
man.
yeah, I just feel like now I get to focus on filling my cup personally. And it's exciting not to know what's next, but getting all this information out of my heart, out of my head, out of my hands. Now, if and when I leave my body, I know acro yoga is going to keep thriving. And
Mm.
my life goal with acro yoga is to get 1 billion practitioners. And a lot of times when I say that, the first reaction is people laugh. I'm like, yeah, yeah, let's
Dream
let's
big,
let's
man.
let's laugh it into being. And
Yeah, I love
even
that.
even if I only get halfway there, 500 million acro yogis, we're going to make a dent. We already have made a dent because around the world, if you go to parks in the summer when it's nice weather, you'll see the weirdos having a picnic with a slack line and people going upside down. So it's already making an effect. And I think that if there's more people that have these tools, there's going to be a lot less friction in the world. There's going to be a lot more synergy. And that's
Mm,
something I will stay dedicated to.
mm, beautiful, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, and in a second, we'll talk about you working with my partner and I and
I
and
can't
and
wait.
just how much that has it's just it's so delicious. Um, but at first, I have a twofold question with this idea of you putting the book out and then kind of transitioning into this new world of possibility. One is besides what you said about 1 billion practitioners, do you have a hope or dream for this book? So, anybody listening, besides obviously purchasing the book, which is a given, everyone should that's interested in this. How can we put our collective quirks together, our vibes to help this book? What's your vision for it? What's really your vision for it?
Yeah, what I By design, the way that I've written this book is you can jump in at any point. So let's say it's somebody who's into CrossFit. They might be really interested in the flexibility building. Somebody who's a yoga practitioner might want to look into how to do handstands from an acrobatic perspective. Somebody who's in a really loving partnership but wants to have more tools in how to engage with their partner, they might flip to the relationship chapter. So it really, my goal is that whoever picks this book up is going to find something of value. And reading about it is great. Doing it is even better.
Yes.
So I'm actually in the process of making a workbook that will be something that people can take pen to paper and journal about their experiences and check off boxes of, okay, now I've done this skill. This is the next skill. So I want to put a bunch of little carrots in front of people to get them deeper into their practice of knowing themselves, knowing their partners, and knowing that they can expand both those things for the rest of their lives.
Mm. Beautiful. And the second part of my question is, you said you're open to possibility and the unknown. You don't really know what it's going to look like, but you're just creating space for the future. But what if you really get present with the feeling of excitement for the future? And when you fast forward maybe 1 year or 5 years down the road, what is Jason Nemer doing? How is he spending most of his time? And like with this vision of you just on fire for life, what are you doing?
So the good thing is, I feel like I've figured out many of my passions and I've put a lot of them in acro yoga, but not all of them. I love to cook. I love
Uh-huh.
music. I love languages. So personally, I just want to keep getting better at the things that make me and the people around me happy. As far as, the 1 year to 5 year, there's a lot of things that I can predict. There's a lot of things that I can't. But one big step that I haven't taken because of my lifestyle choices is I haven't really invested in one community in one place. So I
Mm.
don't really have faith in governments to solve a lot of our issues, whether it be interpersonal issues, environmental issues, money issues, all the issues in the tissues. So I can definitely imagine getting a group of 50 to 100 people buying a big chunk of land and doing the experiment. And I'm very clear, I am not an aspiring cult leader. Acroyoga can be seen as a cult, so then I would be seen as a leader. And I'm not aspiring to be a guru. I'm not aspiring to be a cult leader. I'm aspiring to take the wisdom that I've collected by watching communities around the world
Right.
and being inspired. The two of the strongest communities in acroyoga in the world, Argentina and Germany.
Wow.
I couldn't pick two countries that are more different on most levels, but what they have in common is the teachers really get along and they look at the big picture and they make their plans for teaching with each other in mind. And so I've seen a lot of things that haven't worked in communities. I've seen a lot of things that have. And to be in a dropped in physical space with people for the long run, be like, all right, we're going to make a go of this for the next couple of decades. I have so many fun ideas of I want to have zip lines and trampolines and pools.
Mm.
And I would just
So fun.
create a huge playground where, we could have a no phone policy for an hour at sunrise and sunset. So, that these would all be agreements that people make. And there would be these meditation decks where we get to offer massage to each other. We get to meditate. We get to pray. We get to connect with the animals on the property. So, a lot of these things are theories that need to be tested by people and time. But I feel like that's one of the bigger things that I want to do with the second half of my life is dive deeper into a fixed community and see what new challenges and discoveries there are there.
Thank you for voicing that out loud. I always am a big proponent of clearly stating to the universe what we want to create and what we want to call in. And I think it's so magical with these things. The moment we speak them, it's like you never know. There might be someone that just heard that reaches out to you because of that statement and is like, I want to help. So thank you so much for sharing that vision. That's very
Yeah.
exciting.
Hopefully we'll be on the commune together.
I'm gonna come hang out for sure. Definitely. So transitioning a little bit, and for this last section of the interview, I really want to empower you to feel free to throw questions back at me
Yes.
and really, I don't even want to say too much as a segue into this because I really want you to be able to take the floor and really shine in the way that you do shine. But I would love for you to talk about the experience of coaching my partner Judd and I. We've had, I think, 3 lessons
Hmm.
so far, and just to speak to us, just to speak to the process, to speak to working with couples in general,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. So Judd is such an amazing creature. I'm so happy that I met him.
Isn't he?
Meeting you has been amazing. Meeting him has been amazing. And I'm always impressed and excited when I see a couple that can function well as a couple and not change how they are as individuals. So I definitely say that's something that I see in the both of you.
Mm,
Because a lot of times when you get into a partnership, you'll either diminish or you'll shine differently. And I really appreciate that both of you have your individual nature, but you both shine well together. And for Judd, consistently, what has been so fun to witness is he makes the little kid face all the time. He's just big smile, mouth wide open, like he is
yeah.
down to express his emotions. And
Yeah.
especially a lot of men in America, that is not a common thing.
Right.
Latin men are a lot more emotive in general. And, we have our cultural lens that we're handed, but then we get to be individuals. And I can see that you both are very dedicated to knowing who you are as individuals before you met. And the empowerment that I see when you surrender to him and when he surrenders to you, because we're switching basin and flying. So this is where we go from, we're talking in the podcast about these theories of acroyoga, when
Right.
you become a base and then the base flies. I love seeing what happens when you two change roles because one role is a little bit more masculine, the other role is more
Right.
feminine, and to see the reaction. So, my question to you,
Uh-huh.
Miss Podcaster,
Uh-huh.
what shifts and ripples have you felt in your relationship that you can directly attribute to things that you've learned
Ooh.
in the acroyoga lessons we've done?
I love this question. And it reminds me of the thing that you're always encouraging us of, which I have now stolen for my everyday life. And it's, what do you say?
Celebrate first,
Celebrate first,
refine
refine
second.
second. So that I've taken that into my life and I recognized how I got a little leaky with my self-talk and how I was get kind of just like, okay, on to the next thing and grinding myself. And now I'm starting to really celebrate first and refine second. And Judd has been reflecting that back to me as well. So when we get in our own spirals about things,
Hmm.
we've taken that piece into our relationship and we'll be like, okay, babe, slow down. I hear you. Can we celebrate something about this first? What did you do well? And
Yeah, oh, that's
then,
music to my ears. I love it.
yeah, man. So this goes far beyond a physical practice that we're
Yeah.
having together. And my first foundations for nonviolent communication came from what I was observing in the acro yoga community. I was like, wow, the way these people are talking to each other, the way they're making requests, not demands,
Hmm.
the way that they're taking responsibility for their emotions. And you spoke about this in your book as well. I think it was your stepfather really teaching you. He said something to you, didn't he, when you were a
Yeah,
kid?
it's emotional responsibility. So nobody can make you mad.
Right.
And that's an interesting paradigm where if you give up your ability to control your emotions, then you're, cast adrift and you're just
You disempower yourself in
exactly.
that moment. So it's like, you made me mad or you made me this.
Hmm.
It's like nobody can make you anything. That moment for me flipped my life on its head. I was like, wait, you mean I'm doing all of this?
Yeah.
This is all
I'm
coming
creating my suffering. It's not
from
my
in
partner.
me. Wait, like that is something to wrap your mind around. And I've beat the book like a dead horse because I listen to it all the time. But if anyone hasn't already listened to nonviolent communication, I highly recommend that book for really doing a great job at explaining why nobody can make you mad. Nobody can make you anything. But back to your question, other things that I would directly attribute to acro yoga and this work with you is deepening trust,
Hmm.
flowering more deeply into this relationship. It is vulnerable to put all your weight on someone, like actually put all your weight on someone upside down with your head facing the floor
Hmm.
and trust
Yeah.
and breathe and have that connection of hands, have that connection of eye contact, making sure you're both breathing. I mean, they're simple things, but they're also complex.
Yeah.
Um, so that, and I think it just generally infusing play
Yeah.
into our lives, which I'm so, so grateful for because we're both very mission driven people. We like
Hmm.
to serve others. And sometimes the work can feel like a lot. I
Yeah.
trick myself into being like, oh, this is such a burden sometimes. And it's from being in my head too much.
Yeah.
So this practice really brings us into our bodies. And there's such beautiful connection. Judd reflected this back to me after our lesson yesterday. And he goes, I love that moment where we were just pausing to talk about something in between, and you kind of like did a little somersault over and then like laid your head on my
I
knee.
remember that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even conscious of it, but that was like the playful childlike monkey in
Exactly.
me.
It's your inner 5-year-old girl that came to play. And a
Yes.
lot of times, our serious lives and our serious careers squelch that potential. And I remember one of my favorite things about teaching at the Circus Center back in the day in San Francisco, I was teaching trampoline, and I had literally a doctor sitting next to a lawyer sitting on the bed of the trampoline, and they would argue over who got the longer turn. And I didn't scold them for it. I was like, good, yeah, keep that up.
Mhm.
Keep acting like a kid. So yeah, when you find those moments of pure, innocent, radiant energy, this is something that is it is a fountain of youth. It is something that is accessible to all of us at all ages. But a lot of us have steered away from that to be, very good at what we do as an adult.
Mm.
And you can have both.
Why is acro yoga such a portal for healing, and why can it be so great but also challenging for couples?
Yeah, so healing can come in many different ways. And we'll go into the sexual dimorphism. A lot of times, a woman learning to lift her boyfriend is so empowering for her to feel, I have the power to lift this human in the air. And at the same time, for a boyfriend to feel like, I'm surrendering, I'm allowing this unknown situation, I'm not in control. So sometimes that's a very healing thing. Physically, when you do things that are acroyoga based, there's a certain amount of intelligence demanded and a certain amount of presence that's demanded. So when I'm lifting a weight, I don't have to be present. I could drop the weight. The weight's going to be fine. So the level of presence is also something that is, I would say, healing to the mental construct, because a lot of us spend time in theories of past and future. And when we drop into the present moment, there's a healing quality to that.
Mm.
The last thing is physically. Physically, there is the potential to use gravity to help us find our true center when we do therapeutics. So, in the therapeutics, the flyer relaxes and the base can do different massage techniques to help their body release tension that we build up as we walk through our day.
This is like when you hang me upside down after our acro lesson and you do that traction on my spine and it goes like
Yeah.
like popcorn up my spine and I'm
Yeah.
just hanging there in
You're
complete bliss.
You're a 1 percentile where I've only met one other person that I can get the same amount of neck releases
Mhm.
consistently.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very gratifying to feel that the body's release, and we've developed trust. So when we have that basis of trust, skill, and gravity working for you, this is a really good combination.
I love what you said about presence, and again, going back to what our culture is missing, I think presence is often sadly a rarity in our social interactions. It's like someone's always on a phone or doing another task. Multitasking is the way, which it isn't. Um, and to the process of like really deeply dropping in presence, I think naturally cultivates intimacy.
Yeah.
So that is happening as a blessed side effect.
Yeah, I was at an event recently. I randomly on the frisbee golf range stumbled into the founder of Whole Foods.
Okay, I love this story already.
Yeah, so my week one
Just
being
another
here.
day in Austin.
Exactly. So I'm playing disc golf, and one of the saltier older men on the course who was really good at talking shit. He was on my team. I played pretty well, and I really liked his vibe. And he's like, "Hey, you should come to this event." So I ended up going to the sports weekend, which is I think the 24th year they're doing this, where you go to his ranch and play a bunch of sports with people. And
So fun.
it was so fun. I met so many great people, and the early adopters there to AcroYoga and to massage were the teenagers. And there was this one, like 6 foot tall, 13-year-old boy that was just like puppy feet and growth spurts and just a hormonal soup. So
Hormonal soup, yes.
with fingernails painted, like he was his own specimen. And I was
Yes.
immediately, I caught his eye, he caught my eye, and I saw him limping, and I ended up working on his knee. And then as soon as that happened, I gained trust with the younger tribe. And that night, I was flying this 17-year-old girl, super cute and bubbly, and she's laughing and ecstatic. And everyone was there witnessing this. And I felt really good and grounded in the fact that I'm a 46-year-old male that can have this very intimate experience with a 17-year-old girl in front of everyone, and there's not even a shred of doubt that there's
Right,
any weirdness, any sexual energy. It's just joy. And when
right.
people see that and they feel that, there's such a disarming that is it's there for a reason. We need to protect. I don't believe that we should just trust everyone, and I think that the protections have gone to a point where they're so innate that we've forgotten how to be innocent and how to play and how to connect without sexuality.
Mm. Actually, I have a quick personal story about this, and I don't even think you know this story. I mean, you were there, but I had a moment of deep trust for you the first day that you came over to give me your book, and we did an acro session, just you and I. And I was hanging upside down for some therapeutics, and I'm wearing this little crop top, and something happened. Things start falling out of,
Gravity
and
always
that's what you
wins.
said. And you pulled my shirt to cover me while I was hanging upside down in this kind of like relaxed position. And you were so graceful, and you had so much integrity in that moment. And like for me as a woman with all of the trauma that comes with just existing in a female body, it was like to have a man cover me up and say, "Oh, gravity," and like not make me feel shame about it or anything like that. I left that meeting and I told that story to Judd. And I was like, this is who this man is. Like, I respect that so deeply. So I just wanted to name that
Mm,
and to thank you for that, because it can get so messy in these spaces. We talk about this all the time in like the medicine world and the shamanic space. And
yeah,
anytime you're in a position of power, you know, people look to you. And especially in a community like the community where there is this idea that of touch that's inextricably linked with it, we want to make sure that we're giving people the tools to not put themselves in vulnerable positions
yeah,
and to develop and create boundaries. And so this was another thing I wanted to touch on is like communication
yeah,
and boundaries, and what does that languaging sound like in the acro yoga world? When how do we communicate around
yeah.
something as sensitive as each other's bodies and what's okay?
Yeah. So, one thing in therapeutics is if it feels good for both people, it's right. And as soon as it doesn't feel good for either person, and this can be physically, like my knee on the hardwood floor doesn't feel right,
Right.
or the pressure doesn't feel right, or I don't want to be touched there. So, there's so many ways that you can invite communication and empower people to make good decisions. I remember one of the groundbreaking moments for me relatively recently. It was 2020, January in India. And I was teaching a course, and out of the 35 people there, almost 30 of them were Indians from all over India. And that was also just a moment to be like, wow, I've been traveling to India and sharing acro yoga for years. There's now a community. So there's this husband and wife, and we did this flying course. There's a lot of difficult flying transitions, and they were struggling. So I just looked at the husband. I said, "Is it okay if I fly your wife?" And he says, "Of course, but of course."
Yeah.
I can't do accents so well. So there I am, like putting this woman on my feet and, head close to crotch, touching her body all over. And I just felt so honored. That is not normal in Indian culture at
Right.
all. In Indian culture, the only woman that you touch is your mother, your wife. There isn't intersexual touch really in most circles.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
love when acro yoga has a culture that becomes safe enough that it supersedes a lot of the other cultural boundaries.
Mm.
And it's very important to constantly define and redefine your boundaries. And it's not something that you say at once and it's like that forever.
Right.
Everything is always negotiable, and the integrity of the connection, it is upheld by clear boundaries.
Right.
And I feel that in my personal life. There was a night recently where I was hanging out with this woman, and I said, I would love to non-sexually cuddle with you tonight. Like, no making out, nothing, just holding space. And when I'm clear and the other person is clear, whether it's in acro yoga or other intimate experiences, it takes practice to bring up that awkward conversation
Right.
in the beginning, but it's not an awkward conversation if it's the right person. And if you say it and it doesn't go well, I know right then and there, I just steered myself out of so much drama that I don't want to engage in.
Right.
And yeah.
I mean, that's what it looks like when we're communicating nonviolently. We're not trying to manipulate anyone into anything, and I think that's really important to state. And thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
story as well. I mean, consent and communication were huge things that Acro taught me. And I remember there were times someone's like, "You want to fly?" And I was like, "Nope, thanks, I'm good."
Yeah.
Like for whatever reason,
Hmm.
it didn't feel like a time I wanted to or a person I wanted to open that container with. And wow, that was empowering. And that
Hmm.
came from saying yes when I didn't want to
Yeah.
and learning that lesson like, okay, that didn't feel good. I felt like that person maybe had ulterior motives for
Hmm.
wanting to play with me. And so cool, noted. And in my own personal journey, acro being the sandbox where I could really test out some of the things I was trying to learn and teach myself. And so over the course of time, really feeling strong and empowered in that community to say no when I meant no,
Yeah.
to say yes when I meant yes, and to
Hmm.
feel excellent about it either way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always going to be a moving target, and it's always going to be something that deserves a dropped-in headspace and conversation. And I think the more that these conversations become the norm, the less awkward it gets. And I also remember the first time we went to Burning Man, 2007 and 2008. We went back-to-back years, and we brought our first acro yoga teacher training posse out there. So that was back when contact improv was what was happening in center camp. And now there's tons of acro yoga. So this is the first seeds planted. And I remember I saw a certified teacher flying naked women and like making out with them. And I was so pissed off because at
Mhm.
that point in my journey, I had a very Puritan acro yoga is not a sexual practice,
Right.
and that's not allowed. And, I could control the practice for the first several years with varying degree. I thought I could.
Right.
And then I realized, maybe 5 years in, that it's number one, not my responsibility. And number
Right.
two, not possible to take sexuality out of being a human. We're all here because our parents had sex.
Right.
Sex is not inherently bad.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. In case you didn't know.
There's a mental image for you while you're listening to the thought room. You're welcome.
Oh, wow. You just brought me there, didn't you? Love you, mom
To
and
be
dad.
fair, you brought us there.
True story. Yeah, and I have another teacher in Greece, Takis. He's one of my spiritual teachers, Thai massage teachers, and he definitely has a very different, probably would not be accepted in America, stance of sexuality is not something that needs to be diminished from your massages. You can be aroused by a person, you can feel that, and I remember one time he was teaching, and some woman says, "What do you do when a man gets a hard on during the massage?" He's like, "Malaka, it's just a piece of meat. Put a pillow over it." And he was just very matter of fact about it.
Right.
And I've received massages from men that I'm not attracted to. And sometimes it's an involuntary response.
Right.
And our bodies are being stimulated
Thank
with
you for talking
blood,
about
with
this.
energy. And I have had male or female clients, if you want to call them clients, partners that have been visibly aroused by what I do. And I can get really upset about it. I can engage it and get really excited about it and spark that flame. And we all have choices. And I feel like suppression is a very volatile choice, because if we suppress our sexuality, look what happens in the Catholic Church. Look what happens
Right.
in many cultures, like in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in India. There's a rape culture that is a normal thing because sexuality is so repressed.
Right.
So I don't know the answer for humanity. I'm navigating the answers in my own practice, and my practice is being honest with myself. This is one safeguard that I have. If I am not comfortable telling my friends what I'm doing sexually, I shouldn't be doing it. So if I'm hiding things, that's not right. And, I think we all have a pretty clear idea of when we know we're pushing our compass, our moral compass. And the thing too is our moral compass changes over time. We're not born a certain way and we ride that rigid line our whole lives. Many people used to think that drugs were bad, and now they're doing medicine ceremonies. So I think communication and navigation of these deeper aspects of who we are as humans is our potential. And it's not easy because we're complicated creatures, but not talking about it is not the solution.
Mm. Thank you for that piece, and thank you for your openness around that. I think that takes a great deal of bravery just to even admit, and I think all of us have experienced something probably along those lines where we felt a connection and we weren't sure what to do with it, or we felt excited in a weird moment. And
Yeah.
I think that is exactly the kind of container I want to create here, where people can hear about people at all levels in all spaces of all types, and there are true human experiences that we're all navigating together. It's
Yeah.
that unity. Um, okay, one more quick story that I just remembered from your book that
Yay.
I love. Will you talk about, I think you were at a conference or something, and you had a calling in your heart to fly a paraplegic person
Mm,
who was there. Will you speak about that?
yeah. Leon Ford is his name. I was at this Summit Series event, and it just so happened that in 1 year, I had the distinct honor, privilege, and opportunity to fly three paraplegics, very different circumstances. So the third one was Leon, and I was at the presenters dinner, and I see this gentleman in a wheelchair, and I just go right up to him, like, "Hey, you don't know who I am, but I'm going to ask you something really strange. Are you ready?" He's like, "Yeah, hit me, brother. What you got?" And I said, "I want to fly you. Are you game?" He just said yes, and with a big smile, and I was so excited. So we finished the dinner, and he's in a wheelchair, and the venue's maybe a 10-minute walk. And I offered to push him, and he's like, "No, no, no. I like to build my strength." And so it was just an interesting journey in general to get to the venue and just learn about him. And he was, I believe, 18 or 19 years old, pulled over, traffic violation, and a police officer shot him 5 times, and that paralyzed him. And
Is he African American?
he is,
Yeah,
yeah,
black. Yeah.
black. Yeah, I didn't read any of the police reports, so I can't weigh in on what I don't know about. What I
Right.
do know about is he had a spiritual awakening because of it, and he's one of the most beautiful, bright people that I've met, and that's why he was
Wow.
there. He was speaking about what happened to him from that shooting, and also the positive benefits, because a lot of us, we see something like that and all we can think about is like, "Oh my God, that's horrible." And of course it's horrible, but for every horrible thing, there are a lot of intangible benefits that you get. So I don't like the term disabled. I like extra abilities.
Mm.
So when somebody has, because I've had some injuries, ankle, elbow, and when I couldn't train, I would train things. When I couldn't train fully, I would train things that would make my level so much higher later. So I got extra abilities from my disabilities. And I think somebody who's in a wheelchair, they learn things that are fucking amazing. And so one of those things, so I get there, I fly him. And that was obviously so cool for people to see this
Yeah.
man in a wheelchair lean
Wow.
forward and just trust me. So anyone there that was
Wow.
like, I'm not sure if I can do that acro yoga thing, they shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
Like
that
if this guy
obliterated their, self-doubt, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
So
Cool.
that was cool and beautiful. But what was even better is when he got done, he's like, okay, I want to be the base now. And I just looked at him with a really confused look. I was like, all right, I believe in miracles. I'm a really open minded person, but I don't get what you're saying.
Yeah.
He's like, no, 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 on my arms. My arms are strong. I push my own wheelchair. And he's a very strong guy.
Wow.
So we had some acro yogi there that was pretty well trained that could jump up into a shoulder stand on his hands. And sure
Wow.
enough, this
Oh, what a special
yeah,
moment.
this paraplegic was flying people on his hands his first time ever. And
Wow.
that story, when I posted it on my Instagram, was the number one story of the year. Horrible lighting, not shot well, but people could see what happened.
Right.
And people want to believe in humanity. And those are moments that really shine through that when you can empower somebody that has quote unquote disabilities to do things that most people don't think they can do that have their legs, it's really a contagious feeling.
I love this.
You picked some good parts of the book.
Man, the whole book is good. And so, let's talk about that. Where can people buy this book? Where's the best place to go purchase Move, Connect, Play right now?
Yeah, so anywhere where you buy books, it is for sale. We are working out the details of when we're actually going to launch this, but I'm pretty sure that you will be able to get them in bookstores, but Amazon or anywhere you get books. And basically, Move, Connect, Play, the art and science of acro yoga is going to be the Bible for all things acro yoga. There's so much information here. And the second book that will come out in about a year is going to be for more intermediate and advanced practitioners. So you have a year to dive into this one, and I'm going to have more coming.
Excellent. And for those who are so excited after listening to this to immerse themselves in the culture and the actual practice, like getting into community with other acro yogis, where can they find that in their city or online? Videos, resources, any other little nuggets you want to
Sure.
sprinkle here?
Yeah. So, what's great about this moment in the history of acro yoga is most major cities, if you go to Facebook, Austin acro yoga, you're going to find people there. Acro Yoga International is my YouTube channel. So you can find lots of things there. And I'm sure we'll have show notes so we can put all these details in. And really, I think the way to start with building community is find one or two of your best friends that you want to grow your relationship with. And you can start doing acro yoga with them, either with this book. There's also an online course that is the video accompaniment to this book. So
Yes, let's talk about that.
yeah, so I actually started with the online course before I even started the book. So all of the contents in the book are already shot, and it's super progressive. It's very inviting, and if you have acro yoga experience, it's just going to sharpen your ideas of how to refine the details. Like what you said, celebrate first, refine second. So there's a lot of these principles of how you can do the practice that are going to make what you already know of acro yoga work even better.
So, what I'm hearing is that Move, Connect, Play, the book was first a course
True.
with you as the teacher. And
Yes.
I'm also hearing that this is filmed in different video parts, instructional. So, for people who don't have the luxury of having you in their living room, like Judd and
Yes.
I, they can get the next best thing, which is this course, which is already made. It's available.
Yep.
What's the price on that course?
$95.
Cool.
But
And we're going to give, I think we're going to give a 15% discount for listeners of this show using the code THOUGHTROOM. So the URL for that will be
acroyoga.org.
/ThoughtRoom.
Good teamwork.
Amazing.
We got
So
this.
look at this collaboration.
Right?
This is, see folks, this is what comes of it. So,
Yes.
excellent. I hope people take advantage of that and of you and your gifts and your skills in this offering. Jason, I love you.
Oh, I love you too. I'm so honored to be in this space with you and to just feel so much support from you. And the future is bright. Lots of possibilities.
The future is bright. In closing, where can people find you on Instagram, social media if they want to connect or email you directly. If some angel investor wants to come fund your community right now, where
Yeah.
can people find you?
So I made it really easy. Jason Nemer on Facebook, Jason Nemer on Twitter, Jason Nemer on Instagram, and acroyoga.org is the place that you can find lots of resources. There are 1,500 certified teachers around the world. COVID has definitely put a bit of a pause on a lot of group classes happening around the world. So it depends what region you're in.
Right.
But like I said, there's plenty of video resources. So find a couple of friends, get it together, and do things you never thought you could.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Besitos. Muchísimas gracias.